Welcome to another edition of Vigorously with me, Val Kleinhans. We're talking music today. The Acid Sisters are in the building. Welcome. I am so happy to have three members here today. I found you on Instagram, been obsessed ever since. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so
Well,
much for having us.
yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you very much.
My favorite aspect of your sound is just the haunting as fuck vocals, honestly, and the moody guitars. Really. How would you describe your sound to anybody that hasn't heard you yet?
Oh, geez, I don't know. What do you think, Jacob? You're always good with the description of the band.
I don't know. I like that you said moody and haunting. Those are good. We aim for that for sure a little bit. Um, we're all big fans of Black Angels, so that
Mm.
kind of haunting thing comes with the territory. And Elena definitely adds a lot with her wild vocals.
Hmm.
We love those minor chords.
Yes, we do.
They're important. They can evoke a lot of emotion.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of dark emotion, which is what we're all about, I feel like, most of the time anyway.
totally. Tell me about the aesthetic and the design behind the Acid Sister shoot, because I love that we've got a bit of a retro, somewhat 60s, kind of 70s motivated-ish vibe going on. Was that intentional? Did we always want to have that, or did that just kind of happen because that's what you like personally?
You take this, Nick, because
Yeah.
Nick and Jacob kind of started the band originally, so I feel like you guys kind of set the vibes in motion.
Mm.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels a little bit of all the things that you said. I mean, definitely Jacob and I have when we used to work together and we kind of talked about starting this before we ever even knew that we were going to start it, kind of like hypothetically. And I think a lot of it was originally drawn to stuff that we were really into at the time, definitely a lot of 60s stuff, but
Mm.
I think when we started playing, it didn't really have quite that real like 60s sound. I think it kind of evolved into kind of a modern mix of that, but I would say definitely we draw a lot of inspiration from that time. And then every once in a while we'll throw a little bit of uh kind of dark wavy stuff in there. So somewhere we're finding our own kind of formed our own sound over the years, kind of mixing it all together.
Yeah. I love the vibe. Like it's very, I don't know, every time I listen, I'm thinking femme fatale movie, like backstory or soundtrack with it. Like if there were a Kill Bill 4 or 5,
Hell yeah,
boom.
that's awesome.
You would be the soundtrack for it in my eyes. So how did you come to find that you all worked well together? Because not everybody, every musician or every band gels as well,
I
as
think we
quickly.
got we got kind of lucky in a way. It was very organic. As I said before, Nick and Jacob kind of started the project. I came in and started kind of jamming with you guys. I had only been in one other band before, but this felt more like kind of my style.
Mm.
And then Nick was like, "Oh, my wife is actually a pretty good singer." So she came to start jamming with us, and it all just kind of built from there.
Yeah, I would say it almost felt, I don't know, I hate to say it, but it was kind of like accidental. I mean, I Jacob and I had worked together for a long time and instantly like first time I met Jacob, I was like, he's the coolest guy. Like instantly we were talking about music. And that went on for honestly years. Actually, Jacob and Lizzie spent some time in Austin, so we kind of reconnected when they came back to Vegas. Um, and Jacob was like, hey, we should jam sometime, and I was kind of coming to an end of a previous band, and we literally lived like a few blocks from each other, so kind of just showed up one night. We had a couple ideas that we had worked out, and Lizzie came in and just started doing stuff on the synth, and it was like, wow, this actually like instantly sounds cool. And then like Lizzie said, Elena, my wife, was like, "Hey, I want to come sing," and we were like, "Oh, okay." Well, we didn't really know what we were doing yet, and I don't remember what was that like night three of jamming or something. And she
Uh,
came and literally like brought in lyrics and started singing. Actually, it would have been well, "Sci-Fi or Die," right? It ended up
Yeah.
becoming
Yeah.
"Sci-Fi or Die," and we were all like, "Oh, okay. I think we're starting a band, like for real."
Yep.
that's amazing. What lured her in? What do you think made your wife want to join, Nick?
You know what? This was her first band. She grew up doing theater and stuff, and like Lizzie said, I had heard her sing. I mean, we've done karaoke and stuff, and I'm like, wow, Lena
Yeah.
has a really great voice and stuff. But I don't know. I knew that she was into writing like poetry and stuff, and I think she's super artistic, and she was like, I want to do a project with you, and this just happened, and honestly, the second that we heard the vocals on the stuff, like you said earlier, it really set the mood to kind of the music that the three of us were like, this is what we want to write and do. And she came in and laid like the perfect atmosphere over that. And that was literally it. And we've never turned back, really.
Badass. How did all of you fall in love with music originally? Do you remember that moment or that album or that band?
Should we go by age?
However you want to go.
You go first.
I think I started from reading like newsprint Thrasher magazines,
Oh,
um,
nice.
skateboarding stuff in the 80s, and I would see these crazy ads, and I was like, who are the Misfits? Who are the Sex Pistols? Who are these crazy bands? And I had some money, and I went to some record store, and I bought a bunch of cassettes, just random stuff that I had seen. I bought like Sex Pistols and Naked Ray Gun and The Clash, and I was like 12 or 13 at the time. And of course, when you hear the punk stuff when you're a kid, it sets you on this trajectory, you know. And that was it for me. It was like, you know, the 80s skate world, and then hip hop was taking off, you know, at the exact same time. It's like a lot of people don't think about it, but like the punk stuff in the 80s was just before the hip hop in like the mid 80s. So you're seeing all this stuff happen with youth culture and, you know, skating, surfing, BMX stuff, whatever. And that I was instantly like, that's my world, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For me, I started playing violin from a young age. My dad was a sound engineer and also into music, but it was a little different because he would blast the Carpenters, and I watched The Sound of Music and Fantasia over
Yes.
and over. But music in general has just been a big part of my life forever. So it's just been a matter of like, which route do I want to take with it now?
And mine's similar. I've literally been into music since I could remember. It didn't start playing until much later in life, but
Hmm.
I'm gonna sound super cliche, but my parents were really young and listened to music, so we always had records around. And I think I was honestly 5 years old, and they had a Kiss Alive album.
Yes,
And
that seems to be the one. That seems to be
I,
the
I
one.
mean, a million people have told the story, but I saw them on it, and I was like, wow, I want to look like that. And literally, me and my cousin would do concerts. I was always Gene Simmons, and he was Peter Chris. But that's what started it. But then, truly, like really wanting to be in a band. I grew up in Seattle, and I'm sure you're familiar with the band the Murder City Devils. Um,
Yeah.
I remember seeing them and being that was the first time I remember being like, I want to be in a band. Like I want to be a musician. So that's kind of what started it. Not that, necessarily sound like that, but that was my true probably inspiration of wanting to actually like perform was seeing them.
Yeah, there's something about that age. I don't know, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. It just seems to be like whatever you gravitate toward at that time, that kind of becomes your musical personality or the
Mhm.
core
Yeah,
of it. Anyway, you can always branch out. You can always expand. My personal rule is I'll give anything at least one listen.
Mhm.
And then
absolutely.
if I don't like it, okay, we'll move on. But that's probably why I predominantly stuck with, the hair metal days or the Guns N' Roses days or the Motley Crue and the Aerosmith and all of that, because at that I was that age when I was getting into them. And
Mhm.
then, but also at that time, we have Usher, we have Jay-Z, we have, Ja Rule, Ashanti, J-Lo, like all of it is happening at the same time. So I have this weird eclectic mix, but I didn't think it was weird because I was lucky enough to grow in a household that had a variety of music being played too. My mom was into all of that 90s R&B. And then my dad had like more of the rock side and the countryside and the Southern rock side. So it's a beautiful thing when you get to explore all of it. There's
It's
something
awesome.
about it really is. There's something about going to the record store and like getting vinyl or a CD. I
Yeah.
miss that. I miss that so much. I know that you guys have put a couple things out on vinyl. Was that important to you to like pay homage to those days?
Big time.
Absolutely, yeah. Our second album is being pressed now, so it should be out, we're hoping, by the 1st of May is what we think. We'll see. But it's in the works. It's ordered. And we have the first album is still out too. But no, Nick and I and Lizzie, we've all been huge record nerds and have tons of vinyl, always going to the record stores, always pre-ordering stuff and buying stuff at shows, and maybe spending a little too much money, but that's how it goes. I've never really regretted a good vinyl purchase, you know.
Well, Jacob's also, as you probably remember from our little conversation earlier about microphones, he's
Yeah, yeah.
definitely like an audiophile and like all the different types of media that you can consume. And so I think from the beginning when we started talking about we should record some of this stuff, that was always the way we were going to go.
Nice. And all of us here are definitely old enough to have seen that transition between like vinyl, CDs, and streaming. And now streaming seems to be dominating at the moment. Do you remember your initial reaction when you started to see that streaming was becoming more and more popular, or more and more the way things were done, quote unquote?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being, I mean, still pretty young, but like obviously the Napster time. And
Oh, yeah.
I'll be honest, like I get it, you know, big artists being upset about it, but I also remember being like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm finding all this stuff that I could never find before. So it's weird to like see the evolution of that. And I remember possibly, Jacob, you were there. I don't remember, but we were at a show in Vegas one time, and there was like a Spotify bus like rolled up
Oh.
to a show, and you were literally picking songs. And it was, I remember being like, "What is this? Like, this is cool but weird." And now, you know, like I said, here we are now, and it's like, gosh, I hope we can get a lot of Spotify streams because it's just the world that we live in now. We need those streams for people to go buy our records. So.
Yep.
I don't remember that, but I believe you.
It was like a, you know, Burger Records type stuff, back then type of era.
Got it.
Yeah, sounds like some sort of promo thing they were doing, probably when they were first putting themselves out there, not knowing what they would become not too long after. I mean,
hoping
my
they would become
goodness.
what they are now, maybe.
Right.
Probably. I mean, I have this like internal battle because I like the convenience of streaming, and then I also miss coming home with the physical copy and seeing that just badass explicit content label and being like, I hope my mom doesn't find this, but I secretly hope she does because I want to be a rebel.
Well, and for me too, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but on Spotify and any other streaming services, I don't necessarily listen to the whole album. Whereas back then, you might take a chance on like, this looks interesting, or I know this one song. And then you have kind of that like experience of having the whole album. You play through the album, you look at like the booklet that it came with, and it's like, okay, I get what this band is trying to do, versus just hearing like their top 2 singles or whatever and then moving on and not getting into the deep cuts.
Yeah, totally. Or reading the liner notes, looking at pictures of them. I mean, like, that's what they look like. Whoa.
Yeah.
It was so exciting. It was awesome. But it evolves like everything else. And I don't know. I tend to like the convenience of streaming now. But we'll see where it goes. It's one thing we know is it's probably going to change.
It's going to change, yeah, for sure.
It's going to change. So at the time we're talking, Neon Graveyard has just come out not too long ago. What has the reception been like?
It's been good.
Been good so far, yeah.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of good feedback. People tend to like different songs too, which I love. You know, we don't have the whole crowd like gravitating to 1 or 2 of the songs. I always hear from different people they like different tracks.
Yeah, it's like compared to our first record, I mean, we've talked a lot about this as a band, but the first record seemed like a lot of the songs, not similar, like they sounded like each other, but they were kind of all in the same vein, where this album felt, as we were writing the songs, it was so much like, gosh, that sounds so different. Do we think they all fit together? But now hearing it as an album, I feel like, especially anybody that liked us before, there's so many tracks on there that feel familiar, but at the same time, I think it's gained a lot of people that maybe didn't listen to the first record the first time around. So I think that's been not necessarily surprised, but definitely something pleasant to see that it's definitely reached a different audience so far.
Yeah, I mean that's where I am. That's how I found you guys, was just like I mean I'm a social media nerd, so it kind of popped up onto my feed and I'm catching up on, the first record now. In
Yeah.
addition to digesting all the new stuff. I'd love to hear more about the work behind Neon Graveyard, because so much goes into production and design and everything in this literal piece of art. Jacob took on recording and mixing the whole thing. Your first time, I read. How was that?
Well, so we coming out of the COVID era, we had a friend. I mean, he's still a friend, but there's a record store in Vegas that one of our friends runs, and there's a recording studio attached to it.
Mm.
And he had some health issues kind of suddenly, and we had been in talks to do some demos at his studio. So when that happened, we were like, okay, that's really bad news to hear. Proceeding, maybe I'll just do some at the house. We'll just do a demo and see what we think. So I forgot what we recorded first. It might have been Black Cherries,
It
or
might have been, yeah.
anyway, it was one of the songs, and everyone's like, that sounds all right. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds okay, but I think I don't have tens of thousands of dollars, a huge analog board and
Mm.
tape machines and, fancy compressors and mics. I don't have it all. I have like a modest little studio, but I'm gonna keep going. So I just kept going, kept mixing, and I clearly feel like I took too long. We could have done it a lot quicker, but when it's your thing, I mean, you're gonna just, split hairs continuously,
Yes.
Mhm.
for weeks on end till 3 in the morning, until, Lizzie would yell at me, come to bed, we'll work on it again tomorrow, and at the end you kind of have to just say, this is good enough. This is where it is, and this is what it is.
Mhm.
And we did. But a bulk of the songs had been finished by that point, and then we were just kind of cleaning up, adding secondary tracks or fixing little minor mistakes that we thought were kind of obvious or whatever. And from then we're like, all right, it's time, screw it, send it off to be mastered. And that was that.
Yeah, let's go. I don't.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a concept album. What are some of the themes, though?
I wish Elena was here to talk
I
about
know.
these themes. Yeah, she's a huge part of the themes.
It's I prepared myself. I didn't know if this was gonna come out, if it would come up. So I was like, okay, because we literally have had this conversation with Elena. So again, not to speak too much on it with her, but the music again was just, we were really drawing to just stuff that we loved.
Mm.
Like I said, there's some tracks on there that were very much like, we're super into like psych rock and stuff, so there's definitely those tracks. But then we had a handful where we were kind of experimenting with, like, I'm a big fan of like Bauhaus and stuff, and I don't,
Yeah.
and that whole era, and that definitely, some dark wave sounding stuff. But when Elena started singing on all of them, and again, not to be naive, but I'm usually just focused on the music. Kind of like
Mhm.
I hear her singing, I'm like, wow, that sounds great, but I don't really always hear the vocals until much later, and I actually have to like, oh, what are you saying here? Um, but we lived in, we're in LA now, but we lived in Vegas for about 13 years, and a lot of it she wrote about our time there, and just kind of
Mm.
uh, a little bit. She said too, of like, if you haven't lived there and really experienced it, like, the three of us know, it's such a cool place that I think everybody gets so stuck on like the strip and things like that, that they kind of miss the beauty of Vegas and like how cool it actually is there. And I'm originally from Seattle and she's from Texas, so the desert was a very different thing to me. So it took a
Oh.
while to like, really love the desert, but it's super cool. And she kind of, a lot of the lyrics, again, not speaking too much for her, but what she said, it was a lot of like homage to Las Vegas and just the actual like beauty of it, even though some of the songs don't quite sound, they have kind of that dark element, but it's supposed to be kind of that like misconception of Vegas and how it actually is like such a cool and unique place.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say Elena's definitely into like dark fantasy, aliens. just like
Nice.
weird shit. And like
Yeah.
there were some times where like we weren't sure, like it needed a line or we needed a cool phrase, and we'd open up like an old English lit book and just find the weirdest thing we could find. Like one of them is "the cock has crowed," and we just found that in a book and we are like, that's fucking rad, we're gonna throw that in somewhere.
Well, Lizzie was going to nursing school during the first album, and
Mhm.
you guys just cracked open a medical textbook and started reading
Oh,
out
Yeah.
phrases for
Well, I wrote a little bit of like a verse, if you will, because I was trying to memorize the blood flow through the heart with the circulatory system. And she took that and actually turned it into like a good song,
That's
which
on
is
Evil
Evil
Genius.
Genius
Yeah.
now. But
yes. I
yeah,
love that.
so I guess we draw inspiration kind of from everywhere.
Medical
Medical
textbooks.
terminology.
Medical
I
term.
know. Medical terminology. No, that's so fun. It's like it's the core of every like Autopsy and Cannibal Corpse album. Honestly. I mean, really, it worked for them. I think it's fine.
But I will say, like Lizzie said, probably hidden behind every song, there's definitely alien stuff in what
Mm.
Elena writes about. So it's all in there somewhere.
I mean, I think they're out. I think they're out there. I think they're out there. We can't be the only ones.
Some
We
Also,
people out
can't
wait,
there.
yeah,
we can't still think that they're not, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
something's out there. Something's out there, and honestly, I hope they save us from whatever nonsense is happening here.
Correct.
I'd be
Yeah.
fine if they came and were like, "Hey, hello, we're here." I'd be like, "Cool, take me with
Let's
you.
go.
Let's go."
We might need them later this year. We'll see.
Oh my god, yeah. Woo! I
We, we
knew
won't
this
we
year.
won't we won't get into that, but we'll just say we may need them if they're
We
out
may
there.
honestly, I will give them my number personally. We'll have no problem with that. I would love to hear more about the misconceptions of Vegas too, being that, all of you have your hearts there and you've got a soft spot for it. I'm not a Vegas native. I've only literally been there like once in my life, but what do you think some of the misconceptions are that the rest of the country or the world misses when it comes to Vegas?
That it's shallow, that it's all just one street, that we all live in hotels. Like, it can't possibly be a real community. I think
Oh,
I'm the only one, maybe Steve too,
Steve, our
that
bass
was
player,
born and
was born
raised in
here too. Yeah.
Vegas. So, I can't speak too much to how it compares to other cities because this is all I know. I mean, like Nick said, we lived in Austin for about a year and a half, and that was a wild experience to me. But yeah, I always get people coming in and thinking automatically that unless they're there to party, that it's just going to be a terrible time. But it's so beautiful. Like Nick said, the weather is amazing. We get sunshine. It's convenient. I don't know. I just
It's
love
cheap.
it. And it's almost like this sounds funny because we have what, 2 million people here. But if you've lived here long enough, it starts to feel like a small town because you kind of start to know everybody.
oh.
So if you meet somebody new, you just ask them what high school they went to, and then you can be like, "Oh yeah, I know so and so." And it turns out we have all these mutual friends, and like, especially after 1 October, I think that was really like magnified how much of a community Vegas has. Um, so yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this. We don't have to do the whole podcast show over Vegas, but I fucking love Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely curious. What is the music scene like there?
It's pretty small, honestly,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard. I know promoters will have trouble finding a similar band to a show they're trying to put together. Like, there's a
Oh,
show they want, a big headliner, national or international touring act. Maybe we'll get asked because we're similar, in style adjacently or very close or whatever, and they'll look for another act that's close or even a little bit more different to, bring some variety or whatever. And
mhm.
some promoters have hit us up and said, I need a third band for this show. What do you guys got? And we'll say, have you asked so and so? And they'll say, oh, they're out of town. Have you asked so and so? Yes. Can't do it. Have you asked so and so? Can't do it. So it's so small sometimes that you can't even fill the bill
Mhm.
with
Mm,
the right bands, if that makes sense.
okay.
Which I think is a shame because we're getting a much better touring scene than we've had when I first moved here in like 2005 or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
That
but it,
surprises me, just in general, with it being
yeah,
as big as it is.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, like I was talking with you about earlier, like one thing that's not so great is like so like the radio's all top 40.
Ugh,
Like we
yeah.
have a college station, but
You play classical.
yeah, or like I mean it's cool, you know, sometimes I play some world music. I think there was 1 hour at like 10 p.m. that did Ronald do or
Donald did it.
oh
Yeah.
Donald did it where he would play more of like the hip like college-y station vibes.
Yeah.
But even like the college kids, all they want to hear is like the top 40 hip hop and
Club music.
country and club music.
Mm,
And so that can be a little bit of a challenge for sure. But the community that we do have, I feel like is very tight knit
Yeah.
and everybody tries to support each other, work together, do different things, like work in each other's bands. So that's really cool.
yeah. Does that contribute to you staying as authentic as you are as a group?
I
Yeah.
think so. I mean, we've gone through some lineup changes, and knock on wood, we haven't had, any trouble filling, spots that have opened up with great players and great friends that we've known, for a long time in our little scene and community, which is, I hope it's a compliment to us, but we're definitely grateful to have been able to have people step up and want to play with us, and do a great job.
And it's kind of cool
Yeah.
because there's room for all of us too, if that makes
Mm,
sense. Like even the bands that we're sort of similar with, like we all have our own little thing, which is rad.
Yeah, and like Lizzie said, it's cool that even though it still seems small, like all the bands that are in the scene are super like supportive of each other. And like Jacob said, we've had, different people that have come in and played with us from other bands, and it's just been great to not have like, it doesn't feel like we're competing against all these other
ugh,
bands to try to like get shows and
yeah.
and whatever. So it's that's nice where, I can only we've only had the band in Vegas, so that's all we can really compare to. But you hear some of the stories of struggling to even be able to get shows in some of these other cities, and that's
Hmm.
definitely we've never had that issue. I mean, if we wanted to kind of get on a bill in Vegas or put on a show or something, there's always been people like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. So that's been
Yeah.
great.
There's a lot of dynamics to it. I mean, here in Rochester, we don't have as many venues available, literally,
Mhm.
for groups to play. Minneapolis, they tend to do so. So a lot of the time, if there's something cool that I want to go see, I end up having to go to Minneapolis, which for me
Mhm.
is a little over an hour of a drive, but it is what it is. And I know that that's a challenge for the local music scene here, that there's like one of two bars that they can choose from,
We
and
have a
then that's
little bit
it.
of that too. Yeah, and like one of the main ones that could host the right like mid-size bands, I
Yeah.
guess, closed during COVID and just never reopened. So now I feel like we've all been trying to find like, the right places to play and then you're thinking about like, well, what kind of crowd is it going to be at these like two other venues or whatever. But that can definitely present a challenge for sure.
Yeah. How are you navigating that? Are you just sort of using your community that you've built to kind of bounce that off of each other of what's the vibe here, what works here, what doesn't work here?
Yeah, we could probably talk about like some of the promoters that we work with here in Vegas.
Yeah, and some of the promoters have done a good job of finding other venues that weren't around before the pandemic
Oh,
and
okay.
have popped up. But Vegas is an interesting place because the strip, like we said, overshadows everything.
Mm,
But it could be a pizza shop or an arcade or whatever. They want to have entertainment to bring people in. Like you can kind of turn almost any kind of place will have a stage and a PA, and it might not have the biggest best show, but there's a free garage rock show somewhere tonight.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's some good country show, like classic stuff going on somewhere downtown or like out in the burbs. It's kind of like Vegas has got a stage somewhere, and those promoters have done a pretty good job of finding what's going to work next.
Mm,
Um,
Yeah.
but there is that club gap, a good 3 to 500 capacity thing with a green room and a good stage and great sound system that hopefully somebody will fill soon because um, I don't know. There's only one or two I can think of right now that
Mhm.
that have been picking up the slack since the COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
mm, totally. Well, I know we're going to see more from you. I can't wait to see what comes next. Well, let's talk about what's coming next. What are we looking forward to throughout the remainder of the year or so?
Well, the
But
last thing I think we said in one of the group chats, and you can speak to this too, Nick, if you want, was someone was like, it might have been Steve, the bass player, that said like, "What's next? A 4-song EP?" And we were all like, "Yeah, let's do that."
Yeah.
We
Okay.
probably have. I think at one point we had totaled up, what half finished and finished songs we had, and we are like, we have a third album already. Whether we want to parse it out into half an album or an EP or two or what. I mean, there's material that's will be done in the pipeline in the near future too. So it's
It
in the
it's
works.
always it's a weird thing, like, in a band, it's like the excitement that we haven't even like, our vinyl isn't even pressed yet, and we just put the album out, but for us having, like, been working on these songs for so long and recording and all that, it's like, there's that big, like, release of, "Okay, it's done, now we can finally, like, move on to the next," and we haven't even it's like people are just now hearing those songs unless you'd seen us perform any of them live or anything, so it's always kind of a funny, weird thing of like, okay, well, how much time should we take before we start thinking about recording again? But at the same time, we're kind of like
Wow.
excited to work on the next,
You- No, I completely get it. As fans, we forget about that because we're not behind the scenes and we're not seeing that. I'm like, dear God, Taylor Swift has sat on some of these songs almost 2 decades now. I'm sure she's
Yeah,
exhausted having to perform the same ones over and
that's
over
crazy.
and over and over again. Like, I can't imagine having a catalog that expansive. Her,
Right,
Aerosmith, the Stones, anything. Like, really.
right.
I could not imagine that because there's even songs that we have that will be like jamming and we'll talk about like, oh, we should try to play this song. And I will sit there and be like, I don't even, at one time we probably played it, 100 times. And now I can't even like think how to play parts on some of these older songs. So it's like, I could
Oh.
not imagine having hundreds and hundreds of songs.
Mm-mm.
Could happen someday. And if it does, I'm definitely for it. Thank you so
But
much for your time. Thank you all for being here. Really.
Thank you so much for having us.
thank
This was
Thank you.
you.
really fun.